What do I think about the Djurum Hexcrawl overall? Well, I came into it with some pretty high expectations because the gloaming Hexcrawl from Curse Scroll 1 was so amazing. But I have to say, this new desert region is... Hey folks, I'm William, this is Runeforge, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Djurum, a desert-themed mini Hexcrawl from Curse Scrolls 2, The Red Sands, which is a supplement for the Shadowdark RPG by Kelsey Dion over at the Arcane Library. I really enjoyed the gloaming Hexcrawl from Curse Scroll number 1, but I am a little bit worried about this one because I'm not the biggest fan of desert biomes in general. But I will reserve judgment until we've seen what this particular desert biome has in store for us. That said, make sure to stay tuned till the end where I give my final thoughts on the Djurum Hexcrawl. Alright, so I've got the Djurum Hexcrawl introduction pulled up here. Let's take a look. A vast, shimmering desert where red mountains stand silent watch over wind-blown valleys and undulating sand dunes. Merchant caravans pick their way between fragile oases that dot the wastes, hoping to miss the path of mountain bandits, a howling sandstorm, or the skyborn death of the Scourge. Here, Ifrit-haunted canyons hide the ancient redoubt of the Rosgadai assassins, and priceless secrets lie buried, waiting for the winds to shift in their favor. So that is very cool. I think we are now 2 for 2 in terms of very awesome Hexcrawl introductions, and I have to say that I really love how evocative this is, despite the relatively small number of words that are present here on the page. It's just really impressive how much cool flavor is being imparted by just a very short paragraph. I'm particularly excited to hear more about what the Scourge is, and I also really appreciated the part about the, The Ifrit-haunted canyons sounds very cool, and then also kind of in that same area, I definitely want to see the I think it's like a fortress monastery or a mountain monastery of the Rosgadai. That just seems very cool and interesting to me. So overall, very excited about this introduction. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at this rumors table here. A giant eagle of pure fire dwells in the Gilzai Mountains. Interesting. So that sounds like almost like a phoenix to me. I wonder if that's what that's going to end up being. A fortress full of gold lies deep inside the Howling Caves. And I'm guessing that this is a reference to the Fortress of the Burning Brothers dungeon that's also included in this supplement. All right, mountain bandits watch for travelers coming from the oases. Makes sense. An Ifrit haunts the winding maze of trails inside the echoes. Yeah, I think this is a reference to what we saw in the introduction. I'm very interested by the concept of like an Ifrit ghost or like haunting. That sounds very cool to me. Also, I'm curious to know what the echoes are. That sounds pretty cool. All right, the top of a buried pyramid rises from the sands to the east. Awesome. We absolutely needed a pyramid in this Hexcrawl, so I'm glad that we are getting a taste of it early. All right, an ancient dragon called the Scourge lairs in the Gilzai Crags. Awesome. I was kind of hoping this would be a dragon, but I wasn't quite sure. My assumption is this is going to be like a blue lightning-breathing dragon. But I guess it is possible that it's like more of a neutral or good aligned dragon. But actually, now that I say that, it says, and if we go back to the introduction, it said, or the skyborn death of the Scourge. That definitely does not sound like a good aligned dragon to me. So probably a blue lightning breathing dragon if I had to guess. I do hope that we see some sort of interesting twist on the dragon. I feel like the last Hexcrawl that we saw in the gloaming did a really, really good job of starting with kind of like a common or normal kind of trope, but then building on it or putting some sort of cool twist on it so that it is not just like kind of mundane and vanilla as it might appear originally. So curious to see how that's going to work out. We've also got the Rosgadai assassins that train in a hidden canyon monastery. I am very excited about this. I really like the Rosgadai. And I did a first impressions video on that class like a week ago. Maybe it was a week ago. Time doesn't really flow normally anymore. But yeah, so I'm curious to hear more about this order, which I think is very, very cool and exciting. All right, so we've also got purple worms have a spawning ground in the West Salt Flats. This is very cool. Immediately when I think worms and the desert, of course, I'm thinking about the sandworms from Dune, which I am a pretty big fan of, so I'm glad to see we got some Dune representation here in this Hexcrawl. All right, we've also got elves that raise prize silver camels in a camp to the northwest. So yeah, I kind of really like the idea of a sand or desert elf. I think it fits in very nicely with the kind of theme and aesthetic of elves, while also, again, just being a little bit of a twist on what we're used to. So I think this is really interesting. We learned a little bit about silver camels during the first impressions video of the Desert Rider class, and I think we pretty quickly identified that these are really great mounts, especially fairly early in the game. So I do imagine that if I end up running this Hexcrawl, that will be an important location on the map, because I'm sure my players will want to get a hold of some silver camels, which are, of course, exceptional mounts for the desert environment. All right, so we'll definitely be keeping an eye out for that. And then the last kind of rumor here says, a lost city lies beyond the great doors in the Veil of the Moon. Very cool and evocative. I love the idea of a lost city, especially in a desert environment. That seems very thematic to me. And also I'm curious to know what the Veil of the Moon is, so I hope we get a little bit of information about that in this Hexcrawl. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at these encounter charts. First, we got encounter zone here. All right, so desert, canyon, mountain, salt flat. Okay, that seems reasonable to me. And then there's a couple different types of encounters. Looks like walker, flyer, digger, people. Interesting. Okay. Makes sense. Let's take a look here. Under walker, Rakshasa is the first entry. Man, I just love the word Rakshasa. I don't know why. I've actually never run or faced off against a Rakshasa in any game that I've ever played. So I'd love to try them out in this Hexcrawl. I think that would be really fun. And I also don't know if any of my players have ever run into a Rakshasa, so I think that would be a pretty cool and memorable encounter. All right, we've also got a Naga here, okay. Giant Scorpions, Dune Fiends, that must be a new one. Yes, that's a new monster, not sure exactly what that is. Cobra, yep, makes sense. Oni 1d6 Bandit. I don't know what I know what an Oni is in kind of like Japanese like folklore, but I'm not sure what it means in this context, so we'll have to keep an eye out for that. And it's curious that we'd be encountering an Oni and bandits at the same time. That seems really interesting to me. I wonder if this is like, I wonder if they're fighting each other or the bandits are running away from the Oni. I guess we'll just have to kind of wait and see. We've also got a canyon ape here. Huh. That's really interesting. I'm not sure that canyon ape is like the first thing that comes to my mind when I think of a desert kind of environment. Do apes even live in the desert? I guess I'm really not sure. This might just be my lack of animal knowledge coming through yet again for like the third time reading through this supplement. But I'm curious, like, do apes actually live in the desert? And even if they do, it's not an animal that I typically associate with the desert. So I wonder if there might have been like something else that we might use to replace these. So not super excited about those, but that's fine. And then we've also got a mirage here. And of course, you need mirages in the desert. That's just par for the course. All right, in terms of flyers here, the first thing on the list is the Scourge. So that's that. What's it? It's just all we know about it right now is that it's an ancient dragon that layers in the Gil's-Eye Crags. Very, very cool. I do really like the fact that this Hexcrawl and the Gloaming both had like a really powerful monster that you can just kind of encounter as part of the random encounter tables. I think it goes a really long way towards making the world feel dangerous and alive, and I think that's really important when you're running a sandbox type of game, or at least or I should say it's especially important when you're running a sandbox type of game, in order for the players not to get too complacent, and also just to have an interesting environment for the players to wander around in. So very, very cool. And then we've also got Nefrit here, which makes perfect sense to me. All right, we've also got a Manticore here. That's another interesting choice. That's not a monster that I typically associate with being in the desert, but I guess Manticores are at least like kind of part lion, I think, maybe. So if so, then that makes sense to me. So definitely not a big deal, and I think it would be kind of cool to encounter a Manticore, so I'm good with that one. We've also got some vultures here. Dust Devil, which is another new creature. We'll have to look at that in a minute. A Djinn. Oh, I guess I didn't realize that Nefrit and Djinn were two different things. Neither of those are new monsters. I guess I need to probably go back and look at those at some point in the original rules, because I don't actually know what they do. So maybe we'll check that out later. We've also got a ghost here and a phoenix. So again, this is a reference to that phoenix. I'm pretty sure it says, yeah, a giant eagle of pure fire. At this point, I'm like 99% sure that's the phoenix they're talking about, but we'll keep reading to find out. All right, moving on to the next section here. It looks like we've got a purple worm. So again, another reference to those dune kind of sandwormy creatures. Very excited about that. We've also got some ankegs, which I'm a fan of. Boulette, bone naga, scorpion, skeleton, mummy, mirage. All very cool. I am a little curious. Like, it does seem like there's almost like two distinct different groups here. You've got kind of your burrowing creatures, and then you've got kind of your undead. But I guess in the interest of saving space, they were just combined. Not a big deal. We've also got some Cyrule here. I'm not exactly sure what that is. Looks like it's one of the new creatures. If I had to guess, maybe it's like some sort of like lizard or snake person. But I guess we'll just have to wait and find out. We've also got a mage here, which seems cool. Makes sense. I feel like in a lot of media around like kind of Middle Eastern themed fiction, you do see a lot of like sorcerers and kind of wizard characters. So I think it's cool that we see that kind of representation here. And we've also got some thieves, some gladiators, and a caravan. So yep, all that makes sense to me. Oh, I think I missed something here. All right, where's this 2d20 peasants? Okay. Oh, in the caravan. Okay. So in the caravan, there's 2d20 peasants, and it looks like there's a 1 in 6 chance that one of them is a disguised Rakshasa. I think I just really like the idea of a disguised Rakshasa just kind of traveling along in the caravan. And if you are a fan of disguised Rakshasas, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. At some point very soon, I'll also be taking a look at the Fortress of the Burning Brothers dungeon that's also included in this Red Sand supplement, so definitely be on the lookout for that. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look at some of these new monsters. Looks like the first one we've got here is the Canyon Ape, a clawed ape with sandy, matted hair and reflective eyes. Carnivorous ambush hunters. Okay. Let's see, it's a level 6 creature. It's pretty strong, pretty dexterous. It's got the ambush ability, so it deals double damage against surprise foes. That seems very dangerous. And then stalk. It's also got an advantage on dexterity checks while in mountains and canyons. So I guess it's pretty good at sneaking up on its prey. This is a little bit cooler than what I was expecting. I think it's kind of cool that it's got kind of this like ambusher kind of component to it. And that's not something that I would think of when I think of an ape. But I do have to say that I don't, even if it turns out that apes do live in the desert, an ape is just not like an iconic desert creature to me. Overall, I find the canyon ape to be a little bit meh. And I do think that if I end up running this Hexcrawl, I probably will replace it with something that's a little bit more thematic to the desert. All right, so next let's take a look at the Dune Fiend here. Demons that appear as clay-like elves with jagged mouths and no other facial features. Creepy. So level 4 creatures. Okay, and they have a special ability called Howl. Resting creatures who hear in far, make a DC 12 charisma check or no benefit from rest. Immune 1 day if passes. Okay, interesting. I kind of like that. Yeah, I like that a lot, actually. I kind of do like mechanics that mess with the character's ability to rest, especially in games where a long rest kind of fills up all of your resources, like it does in Shadowdark. I think it can just lead to some very cool and exciting moments when the players are forced into a situation where they have to either fight or engage with something, and they don't have all of their resources available to them. I just think that's more exciting than being able to go into every fight, with full HP and all of your abilities available. So overall, pretty big fan of the Dune Fiend. Let's move on to the Dust Devil. Whirling Elementals of Sand. Yep, that checks out. This is a level 8 creature, so pretty high level monster. They looks like they are impervious to non-magical damage, which makes sense to me. And then they also have an ability called Fling. In place of all attacks, all within close make a DC 15 dexterity check or are flung 1d100 feet in a random direction. That's really interesting. Yeah, that just seems like a very cool and unique ability on a very thematic monster, so I'm on board. All right, we've also got a Mirage here, which is a sinister illusion made manifest by fever dreams and futile hope. I really like the flavor text for that. It's really well done. Another level 8 creature, so very dangerous. So it looks like one of its abilities is Delude. It has the illusory look and feel of what its viewers expect or want it to be, creature or small location. Cool. And then it's a DC 18 intelligence check to notice it's an illusion. That's a pretty high intelligence check, but given how high level this monster is, and because I do kind of want the Mirage to be like a powerful thing, I think that's pretty cool. And then the other ability it has here, which looks like it is built into its attack, one target in near, DC 18 charisma check, dang, or 3d6 damage. Mirage creates plausible illusion to explain the injury. Yeah, cool. Again, this is a really interesting mechanic. It seems very scary with a DC 18 charisma check. And it seems very on brand for a Mirage creature, so I like that quite a bit. All right, next we've got the Rosgadai here. Big fan of them. Black garbed assassins in demon masks. They move swiftly in bursts of smoke. All right, so these are level 3 creatures. A little bit lower than I might have expected. I think in my brain, I think they're just like super strong and powerful, maybe like a level 5 creature. But level 3 is probably fine. They do keep their assassinate ability, which deals double damage against unaware foes. Makes sense. I don't see their teleport ability here. Oh, never mind. Okay, so it's actually built into their movement ability. Instead of moving normally, like all of their movement is done via teleport. Which seems fine for me. I guess that's a way to save a little bit of space on this page. And it's really not a big deal if the NPC Rosgadai are just teleporting around all the time. I really don't think that's a big deal. Very cool. Love Rosgadai. Again, I hope they play a pretty major role in the Hexcrawl that we're about to see. But even if they don't, I will probably make some changes so that they do. So no harm, no foul. All right, what else we got here? All right, Cyrule. Nomadic elves who glide as easily through the scorching desert as the winds. Okay, so not lizard folk. These are desert elves that we've heard about earlier in the introduction. These are level 2 creatures. Yeah, I mean, I think in my mind that elves are, on average, are marginally more powerful than other kind of normal humanoids like humans. So maybe I would bump them up to level 3 or 4, but at level 2 seems fine. They've got a scimitar and a longbow. That makes sense to me. Special ability Desertborn, which is advantage on dexterity checks while in the wild desert. Makes sense. And then they've also got a mount, a loyal silver camel that refuses any other rider. Interesting. It's a cool bit of flavor there tacked on at the end. All right. And then the last one here is the Scourge. The Scourge writhes and screams in constant pain. Its brass and lapis scales are choked with a sickly green patina? Not really sure how that word's pronounced. Blue lightning snaps and coils in the air around it, and thunderclouds follow wherever it flies, but no rain falls from the tormented skies. That's pretty sick. I really like the idea of this massive, kind of very dangerous dragon kind of flying randomly around the desert, and that the characters might run into. So very, very cool. Level 18 creature with 17 armor class and 84 hit points, 3 attacks. So this is an absolute beast of a monster. Very, very powerful. It does have a lightning breath, which is to be expected, and is immune to electricity. Makes sense. Corruption. Swallow the shield of the Witch King to end an ancient war. The evil spirit inside tortures and corrupts the dragon. That's very, very cool. Oh man, that's so sick. So brass and lapis scales. I actually don't, is lapis blue? I'm not sure. But I guess it is technically like a brass dragon. So that means, traditionally that would be like a good aligned dragon. And so I guess this swallowing of this ancient artifact has corrupted the dragon in some way. That's really, really cool. And I guess it does leave kind of an out for maybe the characters to be able to cleanse the corruption. Maybe they can get the shield out in some way that doesn't involve killing the dragon. And I think that would be really cool and interesting. But also, if the dragon swallowed this evil item in the first place, there must have been a very good reason. And I wonder if the shield were ever to make it out of the dragon, what kind of impact that might have on this little setting. Very, very cool. Lots of food for thought. And then the last ability here is Mirage. Once a day in place of attacks, create 3 illusory duplicates that disappear when hit. Determine randomly what an attack hits. That's really interesting. I feel like there's a lot of room for shenanigans with this ability. And immediately my mind went to the thought of having an illusion of this of the Scourge attack the players like before they actually run into the dragon. And I think that would be kind of interesting. So they never really know, like when they do see this this giant dragon, is this the real thing or is it an illusion? And I just think that's kind of cool. So yeah, overall, I'm pretty satisfied with the monsters in this section. The Canyon Ape was not particularly exciting to me just because it doesn't really feel like it fits, but all of the other monsters seem very cool and thematic, and I would absolutely love to run them at the table. Oh, interesting. I didn't see this when I was first flipping through. This says travel in the sands. So I'm expecting more information on how to run a hex crawl in a desert environment. Let's see what we got. Roll once each day for wind and temperature conditions. Makes sense. Travel during the day is unsafe, while travel at night is risky. Awesome, like that. Temperature, hot. If PCs travel in hot or hotter weather, they must consume an extra ration that day. Pushed mounts must also consume an extra ration. Makes sense. I think that's very cool. Inferno. Traveling creatures take 1d6 damage per hour. Wow. That seems pretty brutal, but I actually really like it. But let's keep reading. All right. Wind. Driving. Travel speed is halved. Navigation checks are 1 step harder than normal. Makes sense. Sandstorm. Lasts 1d4 days. Don't roll for wind until it completes. Travel's impossible. No visibility. Dang, sandstorms seem pretty brutal. That's crazy. Do sandstorms last that long in real life? I guess for whatever reason, I just assumed that they were kind of like any other kind of storm, and usually they pass within like a couple hours or something. But like a sandstorm that lasts 4 days, that's terrifying. Like that is absolutely terrifying. I'm really glad I don't live in a desert. But I actually really like everything about this page. I think we talked about it a little bit earlier in the video, but I really like when exploration is dangerous and makes the world feel more alive. But I think they do a really good job of capturing these very cool and thematic rules, again, in a very clear and concise package, which Arcane Library is very good at doing. I like the addition of these additional weather and wind effects. I think it makes a lot of sense, and I like the way that it was implemented. I will say the inclusion of these special rules, while very cool, may make it so that you don't necessarily want to run this for your players the first time they ever do a Shadowdark hex crawl, as this does seem to add like additional level of complexity and challenge to the exploration. But I think it would make for a really cool surprise for more veteran players, like maybe after they've played through the Gloaming or a similar hex crawl, and then moving them into the Djurum. So very, very cool. I like this section a lot. No notes. All right, so before we jump into the hex key, let's go ahead and look at this hex map for the Djurum. So right off the bat, it does look very similar in terms of design to what we saw in the Gloaming, which is good. Again, I like this kind of key we've got going along the left and upper side so that we can very easily see where the various points of interest are. So I like that a lot. I do notice one important change from the Gloaming hex map, and that is that these hexes are 6 mile hexes as opposed to the 2 or 3 mile hexes that we saw in the Gloaming. I think this is a really good change because with the 2 or 3 mile hexes, just kind of based on the way that the Shadowdark exploration or overland travel rules work, sometimes that would lead to situations where you get numbers that weren't evenly divisible by each other, and you were like traveling like partial hexes over the course of a day, and that just didn't feel very good from a practical standpoint. So I'm glad to see that these hexes got changed to the standard 6 mile hex. Very, very cool. All right, so let's see what we got here. Looks like there's some oases here, which is good. I see like a castle kind of thing, like a crescent moon shaped like chasm maybe. We got some sort of tower, some bones. 709 looks like some sort of city, which is cool. We didn't really see a big city in the Gloaming. I think there were a couple like smaller towns and villages, but nothing big. Whereas that one right there looks pretty massive. Looks like we've got like some humanoid figures here in 907. I'm not sure what that is, but it looks interesting. I'm pretty willing to bet that 1203 is the Rosgadai Monastery, so that's pretty cool. We've got that submerged pyramid that I think we heard about earlier on that right-hand side. Another oasis down here. Yeah, cool. But yeah, overall, I really like this map based on the little information that we have so far. Looks like there's a lot of very cool and thematic points of interest. And I'm eager to dig in and see more about what's in store for us. So let's go ahead and do that now. So just like last time, I don't think I'm going to read all of these verbatim. I'll probably just pick out a couple here and there that I think are interesting, and we'll talk about those. So yeah, let's start here with Area 106, the Fortress Ruins. The shell of a once mighty sandstone fortress lists in the dunes like a not drunken ship, a sunken ship. Blast marks mar its walls, and shards of blue-tinged glass pepper the sand around it. 20 ghosts of its former guards materialize inside its broken halls each full moon, whispering curses upon the beast called the Scourge. Only the Scourge's skull will bring them rest. They gift its bearer the scimitar of the Ash Moon. Interesting. Yeah, I really like this. I think I just like kind of ghosts in general. And I also like that it ties into the Scourge, which is this kind of massive ancient dragon that's flying around the desert. I'm a pretty big fan of dragons in general. I don't think that we see enough of them in Dungeons and Dragons. So not only do we get a dragon in this Hexcrawl, but there also seem to be other areas that tie into it, which I think is very, very cool. I also love that it creates some incentive to track down the dragon, which is otherwise a very, very dangerous foe. And the players may be tempted to not go deal with that dragon under normal circumstances. But if they receive a quest, for example, like they do from these ghosts, that might be enough to get them to take on that challenge. I also like that there does seem to be a very cool and thematic reward for completing that quest. So all around, I like this area quite a bit. All right, next let's take a look at area 109, which is called the Worm Trench. 3d6 purple worms flock to these spawning grounds once every month. 4 mothers remain to protect the webbing nests filled with hatchling eggs. Inside, yes, 30-foot deep, 100-foot long trench. Scattered within the webs are a bunch of different treasure, including a flying carpet. Of course, there's a flying carpet, there had to be. And a +2 razor chain called Skin Lasher, whose wielder is immune to poison. The Rosgadai view Skin Lasher as a holy relic and would trade nearly anything for its return. Yes, that sounds so cool. First of all, I love Rosgadai in general. And then I'm also a fan of the purple worms in the context of like kind of being like sandworm adjacent from Dune. So I like that kind of marriage of two different like creatures that I find interesting. And then I love the idea that if you track down this like Rosgadai holy relic, that they'll owe you a favor. And that seems like it would come in really, really handy. And it just seems like a cool and interesting area all around. So again, Worm Trench, very, very cool. 10 out of 10. I love it. All right, we'll also take a look at the Shar Oasis here, which is 304. The most plentiful pond of fresh spring water in the Djurum is a fragrant, palm-ringed hub, bustling with travelers, merchant caravans, mercenaries, and outlaws. A wretched hive of scum and villainy, if I've ever heard of one. Its 60 permanent residents look to steely-eyed Ramir the Lion, a 50-year-old former gladiator, for unofficial leadership. The famed Thraxis Arena draws rowdy crowds each night to bet, drink sweet palm wine, and fight. So obviously we needed an oasis in our desert, and this one seems very, very cool. I like the idea of Ramir the Lion, this kind of like veteran gladiator. I really do kind of like the trope of like an older veteran fighter that has since turned to a more civilian or leadership focused life. I think that's a very classic trope that we can get a lot of mileage out of. So I like that quite a bit. I love the fact that there does seem to be a fighting pit here. We did look at some of the pit fighting rules in the Pit Fighter First Impressions video, and I was really impressed with that particular system. And I would love for pit fighting to have an important role in any campaign that I run in this campaign setting. So very, very cool. This seems like an awesome area. I also like the fact that there's like a lot of like, I guess, mercenaries and outlaws that hang out here. So there's a potential for it to be like a little bit rough and tumble, and not necessarily like a traditional city where for the most part, the characters are pretty safe. So I do like that. I do like that quite a bit. All right, 310, the Saltstone Tower. A lonely, salt-encrusted tower of gray stone thrusts like a needle out of the empty mineral flats. A grizzled, sharp-toothed archmage called the Wolf of Yaren inhabits its drafty halls, digging endless, meandering tunnels beneath it with his trained purple worm, Tajora. The wolf claims to hunt for a fissure that leads to the burning heart of the earth itself. After 50 years, he has found many strange things, but not that. Interesting. So again, I do really like the idea of having like an archmage here, like some sort of sorcerer or wizard. But again, there is this kind of twist on it where he's got a pet purple worm. So that's pretty interesting. And I like the idea that he has this quest to hunt for a fissure that leads to the burning heart of the earth itself. That sounds very cool. And if I had to guess, I'm sure we're going to hear a little bit more about this later in the adventure. So I'm curious to see what that ends up looking like. I also just like having like one or two fairly powerful magic user NPCs in my games in general. as I find that they can be a really excellent source of information or help or quests that the characters might not normally be able to get through other means. And I think it's a pretty cool idea that the characters can start working for this wizard in an attempt to kind of gain his favor and potentially call in those favors later in the adventure after they've had a chance to ingratiate themselves to him. So I really, really like that. I like that he has like this pre-established quest that he's on, and the characters might be able to assist him in finding this long lost fisher. So awesome. I like this one again quite a bit. Very, very cool. All right, area 407, the bones. The bleached bones and skull of a titanic prehistoric beast lie in the sand. Travelers sometimes take shelter under its towering ribs, stretching colorful cloths across the gaps to block the sun. At night, the wind humming through its skull seems to form soft words. The bones mark the halfway point on the caravan route between the Shar Oasis and the city-state of Alkesh. Travelers who dare to journey north of the bones risk being spotted by the Hawk Bandits in the southwestern Gilzai Mountains. Yeah, I just kind of like how this is laid out. This seems like a really important point of interest that sits between two different points of civilization here in the desert. And I'm really curious to hear more about the city-state of Alkesh, as well as these Hawk Bandits. Okay, let's look at those Hawk Bandits right now. This is Area 505. 40 bandits dwell in a network of caves high in the southern Gilzai ridges. Their leader, a principled and magnetic young man named Kadim, a neutral thief, has trained a dozen hawks to keep watch over the stretch of desert between the Shar Oasis and Alkesh. The hawks signal the bandits when travelers stray into their reach. There's a 3 in 6 chance that 2d20 bandits guide their horses down hidden mounted passes to intercept anyone in an adjacent sand hex. Interesting. So again, I think this is a really good example of taking kind of your classic trope of like, you know, standard desert raiders or bandits and putting just a little bit, just enough of a twist on it that it seems new and interesting. I feel like with just the words, so this passage says that their leader, a principled and magnetic young man named Kadim. I feel like the word, like just the little section there about principled and magnetic, really does put an interesting twist on this area. Like, in what way is he principled? Does he have some sort of like thieves code that he adheres to? And how does that make him different from other bandits? So my initial impression would be that even though he probably robs people, he probably goes out of his way not to hurt people unless he's forced into it, which I think is really interesting and kind of maybe a departure from some of the more hardcore bandits that you might see in similar settings. So I'm curious to see like how that might play out. And I also like it from the perspective of like, if he's bringing 2d20 bandits with him, or he has 2d20 bandits, that could very easily be an overwhelming encounter, even for a very seasoned group of adventurers. And I like the fact that if this is a principled thief, and I assume that his people more or less are as well, if that is the case, then this could be an interesting social encounter. And even if the characters do end up losing some of their gear, it doesn't necessarily have to be a party wipe just because of a really nasty roll on this 2d20 number of bandits. So I like that a lot. And also, because the leader seems principled and magnetic, there may also be an opportunity for the characters to ally themselves with Kadim and maybe use his band of bandits for either their own purposes or potentially even kind of reform or redeem Kadim in the future. So yeah, I just think this is a really cool area. I love the idea of these kind of bandits with a code, and I'm curious to see like how that ends up playing out if we end up running this little area in the future. So very, very cool. All right, next let's look at 706, the Howling Caves. Wind blows over the craggy faces of the Howling Caves, filling the silent desert with thrumming, hypnotic tones. Legend holds that a mad prince's treasure lies buried inside the caves, along with him. Okay, so this is an example. So when we looked at the gloaming originally, I guess it was like a week or two ago, pretty much my only issue with the Hexcrawl portion of the gloaming was that there were a few areas that didn't really feel like they had sufficient amount of information to really run them effectively. So like one example was there was like a tower, I think, where there was like some monster lurking in algae infested waters or something, but it didn't really tell us what that monster was. And I was a little bit disappointed because I felt like there wasn't enough information to go off of. And I think this is another example of one of those situations. And I would hope that in future versions of these types of hex crawls that we get a little bit more information kind of fleshing out what this is. So after doing a little bit more reading, it does look like this Howling Caves area is the potential entrance to the dungeon for this supplement. So I guess that makes this a little bit better, but I feel like you could probably just put just a single line here saying that, so that the GM would know to reference that dungeon while they're reading through this, so that they don't make the same mistake that I did. But that is really just like a nitpick, but I think that might be helpful in the future. All right, moving on here to 709 Alkesh. The gleam of Alkesh's white walls and brass-plated domes can be seen for leagues. Natural springs and clever aqueducts feed its magnificent hanging gardens and orange trees. Young Shar Yasmilla and her scheming court rule this city-state of 70,000 souls. Anything can be bought and sold here, and any throat cut for a price. The city of Red Sands has 7 districts: the Alabaster Citadel, the Spires, the Gardens, the Souk, Silver Street, the Forgotten Quarter, and the Old Quarter. And I like that, so first of all, I just like the fact that there is a larger city included in the supplement. The Gloaming did have a couple smaller settlements, but we didn't see anything on this scale. And this seems like a really fun and interesting area, and very thematic and on brand for kind of a more Middle Eastern inspired adventure. And I'm really glad that this was included. I also noticed that these various different districts have descriptors next to them, which I believe align to some of the random generator charts that you can find in the Shadowdark core rules. So that's a really nifty way to flesh this area out above and beyond what we're seeing in this very small passage right here. So it's a really effective use of space and referencing back to some existing resources. So this section didn't have to be multiple pages long as it would be in other supplements. So I think that's a pretty good compromise, and again allows for a lot of depth and flavor without taking up a large amount of space on the page. So I like that quite a bit. I do think that if I end up running this hex crawl in the future, I will spend quite a bit of time fleshing out the city of Alkesh, as it does seem like a central and very important location to the desert. So I think it warrants a little bit of extra time and energy figuring out what all might be here. All right, moving on to area 907, the Ring of Glass Men. Interesting title. 8 statues of humans made of blue-white glass stand in a circle with their arms thrown up protectively. They are a long-lost adventuring party called the Flying Tigers, turned to glass by an ill-worded wish to a djinn. I love that. The restoration spell returns them to flesh. They gift their saviors with an alabaster destroyer and a golden key. See the doors in area 1509. Yeah, just right away, I love everything about this area. It's just super interesting. So this is basically like the petrification trope that you see with Medusa and stuff, but instead of stone, you see glass, which is more thematic and relevant to the desert environment. And then I love the fact that this is another adventuring party and that they were turned to glass by a poorly worded wish spell. That's just very cool and thematic, very evocative, and it just fits perfectly in this type of environment, and I really like it. I also love the idea that if you are able to kind of free them from their predicament, they have a golden key which opens up something called the doors. And I can't imagine that you would just call something the doors without it being very, very cool. So really eager to see what that looks like. And I just love the whole idea of this zone in general. So very cool. Love it. 10 out of 10. Amazing. All right. Area 1203, the Razgadai. Behind a secret door deep within the echoes, a hidden monastery lurks in a sheltered ravine. Its tiered roofs of black wood are bathed in the dim glow of red paper lanterns. 6 Razgadai watch the ravine from spy holes. They each carry blowguns with 3 Nuzul-oiled darts. Inside the monastery, 80 Rosgadai assassins trained from childhood under the half-demon Manasuza and his circle of 5 loyal Oni. Okay, so now we know what an Oni is. Aspirants are tested for many years in brutal trials of pain and self-mastery. Survivors earn the right to eat a single petal of the legendary black lotus flower that grows within the belly of the complex. Rosgadai, who endure the lotus's racking magic, earn the right to leave the monastery, but they must return yearly with an offering or when called on. Once a decade, I can already tell I'm going to love this. Once a decade, the monastery travels for a night to another plane so the cyclical black lotus can bathe in the light of the blood moon from its origin world. That's so sick. On this night, it grants one wish when its petals open. Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, I just love everything about this passage. I'm obviously biased. I like Rosgadai in general. I love the fact that they have like a half demon leader. I love this like kind of ritual that they do with the lotus flower, and that, like, once a decade they have to like travel to like a different world in order to bathe it in the blood moon. And then when that happens, like the lotus can give you a wish. That's just very, very cool. And I also love the implication because there was something that we read earlier in the Hex Key where it said that if you were able to return this specific Rosgadai artifact to the monastery, that they would owe you a very, very large favor. And I'm thinking that this would be a really great way to cash in on that favor. So yeah, I just really love how interconnected all these various different areas are. I think it really does make the world feel alive, and really stands head and shoulders above your typical like Hexcrawl or sandbox area. And because I think that's really where a lot of sandboxes go wrong. The areas just aren't interesting or inspired enough, and they don't interconnect with each other in ways that feel fun and interesting. And I think that this particular Hexcrawl, the Djurum Hexcrawl, does a really good job of that. So overall, I'm really, really happy with what I've seen. And I'm glad to see that the Rosgadai have a central place in kind of the lore of this area. And I'm curious to see what else that we've got in store. All right, the next area here is 1401, the Scourge. An ancient desert dragon makes its lair in the most desolate crag of the Gilzai. An unknown calamity corrupted its soul, and now it is a wicked force of chaos and destruction. It wings out over the desert at unpredictable intervals, throwing down lightning bolts at creatures it passes. Caravan trains would rather see all the bandits in the Djurum charging at them than spot the Scourge on the horizon. At the bottom of its labyrinthine lair, the staff of Ord juts from a hill of 3,000 gold. Again, I just think this is really awesome. I love the fact that there's like this big, nasty desert dragon out there that's just kind of flying around, like looking to cause trouble. I also love this bit in here about an unknown calamity corrupted its soul, and now it is a wicked force of chaos and destruction. And as we saw from the monster section, I think it actually consumed like a powerful, evil, magical artifact that has been corrupting it from the inside. And I just really love that idea. And again, it's just like this, it's this idea that we have this kind of standard, there's a desert dragon that breathes lightning. And it's like, that's not, even though I love dragons, that's not particularly new or exciting. But just this little twist where it's like, oh, well, it's a corrupted dragon, and here's how it got corrupted, and here's how that plays into the rest of the zone. That's enough new stuff to make this kind of encounter really fun and interesting, and I just really like that. I also really like the fact that if the characters are willing to brave the dangers of the dragon, there does seem to be some pretty exceptional treasure in its lair in the form of an artifact weapon and a ton of gold. So I feel like I've been saying this for like every entry, but this is really great. I love it. And I really hope I do get to run this at some point so that I can see this all play out. All right, the next one we're going to look at here is 1506, the Buried Pyramid. A crumbling triangle of cut granite reaches 5 feet above the sand. The rest of the 80-foot-tall pyramid looms beneath the surface. During sandstorms, the entire pyramid emerges in a nimbus of lacerating grit, and a pair of heavy, snake-inscribed doors on its side become accessible. As soon as the sandstorm abates, the desert once again swallows the pyramid beneath tons of earth. Very, very cool. I love the idea that the entrance to the pyramid can only be accessed during the middle of a sandstorm. I think that's a really cool interplay between this location and the special rules for weather, and I just love that those things coincide with each other. I also love kind of the imagery of these heavy snake inscribed doors, and I'd be really interested to hear or see what's inside of it. I will say, like, I'm a little disappointed that we didn't get more information about what's inside. And this kind of feeds into my only real complaint about these hex crawls is that there are certain locations that just don't have enough information. And I hope that the reason for this is because Kelsey plans to go back at a later date and flesh these things out into really awesome dungeons, because I think it would be really awesome. All right, and then kind of the last area that we're going to talk about in this read through is called 1509 The Doors. Where the veil of the moon meets the silent mountains, a pair of towering doors 60 feet high rests on the rock, framed by a row of cyclopean pillars. A keyhole sits in the portal at chest height, but the lock won't open by any means other than the golden key last held by the long-lost adventuring party called the Flying Tigers. Rumors claim a mighty citadel where the sorcerers and djinn walked the streets beyond the doors, but nobody in the Djurum has passed through the silent gateway in 1,000 years. Yeah, I mean, this is very similar to what I just said about the Black Pyramid. This is a very cool and evocative area. I want to know what's beyond those doors. And I do like the illusion. So it does tell us a little bit about some rumors of what might be back there. Kind of like a citadel of magic users and djinn, which is very cool. And I also love the fact that the only way to get in is to help out the adventurers that were turned to glass in one of the previous areas. So I think that's a very cool tie-in. Yeah, I just like the way that was worked out. I think that's really cool. But again, just a very cool area, and I'm really eager to see what might be behind those long-lost doors. So, what do I think about the Djurum Hexcrawl overall? Well, I came into it with some pretty high expectations because the gloaming Hexcrawl from Curse Scroll 1 was so amazing. But I have to say, this new desert region is just as good, if not better, than the gloaming. Despite the desert theming, which I was pretty neutral on, the Djurum really won me over with its evocative writing, clean layout, and amazing interconnected setting. I will say there are a few points of interest that didn't have quite as much information as I would have liked, but that seems to be an intentional choice by the author, so, what can you do? Despite that, I am really looking forward to checking out the Fortress of the Burning Brothers, which is the dungeon that's also included in this Red Sands supplement, so make sure to be on the lookout for that. Anyway, if you've enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel, as well as checking out this next video, which I think you'll really enjoy. But that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching, and have a wonderful day. Bye.